Okay.
But one second though. If you wouldn't mind, Gary, can you please share that story?
I thought you guys knew that was all over the news.
You know, for somebody that I didn't think watched the news, you actually
I have to. What the hell's going on? For what I do, trust me, if I didn't have to watch the news to know it's for what I do and be totally lost, I would do it in a heartbeat. But I have to be topical at times, and I like making fun of these morons, so it makes it easy. No, I watched Tucker.
Tucker's great. I love Tucker.
Tucker's my show.
Yeah, Tucker is a great show. I agree. And on that note, I want to welcome everybody to the world according to that man with his head down, now his head up saluting, Benjamin Jeremy Stein. I want to thank everybody that's live in the YouTube chat. We know it's a Saturday night. It means a lot that you're here with us.
On Saturday night, I just got paid. I'm full about money, don't try to save. My heart say go, go, have a time, because Saturday night, baby, I'm feeling fine. I'm going to rip it up. I'm going to rock it up. I'm going to rip it up and ball tonight.
And on Saturday nights, apparently we do the song first. And I want to remind everybody and thank everybody for that that's been downloading the podcast. And again, I want to remind everybody to sign that petition at mediaactionnetwork.com. Rock Breath will put the link up in the YouTube stream. Please sign that petition. And it means a lot to us that you have participated and have been doing this. And of course, tonight we are joined by the SimpleLifeNow.com founder, Gary, the major
Gary
Russian.
US Bonds.
Sorry?
There was a rock group a long time ago called Gary US Bonds.
Yeah, I remember that band. I remember that one.
I know I've heard of Gary Newman, but I'm not familiar with that. And Gary Collins, welcome back as always, Gary.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here. You're in a different room tonight. You're not in the washroom. And I want to, of course, welcome the show. Would be complete without America's humble servant, lawyer, teacher, provocateur, saint, sinner, lover, husband, grandfather.
Doctor.
But that's, of course, the last and the most important thing. You're Dr. Benjamin Jeremy Stein. And welcome everybody to the world of Ben Stein. I want to get to this right away because you sent me an email last night or yesterday, and it had the most perfect word. You called it Bidenomics, and I found it extremely fascinating. I thought it was brilliant, play on words, Ben. And you wanted to talk about Bidenomics and race.
Well, go ahead. People have been wondering what Mr. Biden's, President Biden's proposals are going to be about the economy, and he hasn't been very forthcoming thus far, but now he has somewhat. And what he seems to advocate is what I would call a kind of mishmash of supply side Keynesianism and straightforward racial bribery. And what's going to happen is the U.S. is going to borrow a great deal more money, a hugely greater amount than we can afford to borrow. And we are going to use that money to pay bribes to non-white African-American and other non-white Americans in order to keep them subservient to the Democrat Party. Now, this supposedly is to stimulate the economy and make the economy grow. And to some extent, it undoubtedly will. But what's really happened here is that we already have a very substantial boom going on. We already have a very substantial recovery coming after the crash having to do with COVID. And what this is going to do is like pouring gasoline on a fire. And usually when that happens, to carry forward this crude analogy a little bit better, a little bit farther, we have inflation. So we're going to have to worry about inflation, and we're going to have to worry about it in a serious way. There's this level of monetary creation without there being inflation accompanying it would be extremely unusual, and I might say unheard of in the history of economics and unheard of in economic theory. Now, why are we pouring all this money onto an economy that's already recovering? I think the answer has to be racial bribery. I mean, the economy in general does not need this money. But there are certain groups in the economy who are lagging behind other groups, and they need to be bribed, at least as the Democratic Party sees it, I don't see it that way. I think African Americans are perfectly capable of making their own way in the world and being successful and achieving whatever they want to achieve, just the same as white people. But the Democratic Party doesn't see it that way. So they are passing out these enormous sums of money to non-white Americans in order to stimulate them not to work more, but to endlessly vote Democrat. And here I'm going to back up, and I apologize for going on so long.
Go on as long as you want.
Thank you. When LBJ signed one of the voting, either one or two of the voting rights acts, and some gigantic amount of money for the so-called war on poverty, which did employ me for a while, and I am grateful for them. He said, we're going to have those N-words voting Democratic for 100 years. And that was a big change because the African Americans used to vote Republican because the Republicans had freed them from slavery. But Lyndon Johnson was much too clever and cynical for that. So he bribed the African Americans to vote Democrat. And it has worked phenomenally well, especially in recent years in terms of affecting the outcome of elections. Now, question is, what is new about this? It's always been true that the government tries to bribe various interest groups to vote their way. That's not at all unusual. The idea is, and by the way, this was always the basis of Keynesianism, named for John Maynard Keynes, one of the great geniuses of all time. And he said the economy would usually by itself go to a state of equilibrium, which would be full employment. But he said there would be times when, for various reasons, there would be rigidities in the economy that would keep it from going to full employment. When those happened, we needed to have money poured into the economy to make the economy grow past the rigidities. And that is what Bidenomics is about doing, pouring money into the economy to have it go past the rigidities. But everyone, including Keynes, said this would have to stop after a while. We couldn't do it forever, otherwise we'd go broke. The Democrats, under the new Democratic economists, I don't know their names, so I'm sure they're very fine men and women, probably some gender fluid as well, said there's not going to be any stopping point to this deficit spending, financial stimulus. It's going to go on forever. And that is, I think, wildly insulting to the African Americans of this great country, and tells them that the government and the people who run it think that they are so incompetent that they will need fiscal stimulation forever. And that, by the way, there's never been any group that needed fiscal stimulation forever. And I don't think the Black people of America will turn out to be that first group ever. At least I certainly hope not. Let's give them a chance to show what they can do. If the shackles of discrimination are taken off, which they were about 70 years ago and 60 years ago, they've been taken off. So now let's see what the Black people can do with their own God-given abilities and energy. And I think they'll surprise the whole world at what turns out.
And brilliantly said, and thank you for that lesson. I want to apologize to people. I think I am having some technical issues. But Gary, what are your thoughts on what Ben just said?
Well, as he was talking, I thought, I want to be called astronaut Gary from here on out, or astronaut Collins, because I feel like I live on Mars half the time with what's going on. And plus, it appears that if you're a Democrat, you can just give yourself a title, whatever you want anyway. And I was told by an email this week that I pick on Democrats more than I pick on Republicans. So that is why I'm labeled a right-wing extremist. Okay. Whatever. He's an idiot. But
and you don't have the right. You don't have the, it's whatever.
What's that?
It's whatever.
Yeah, I know. It's, but I agree. I agree with Ben. And obviously Ben is, when it comes to this, he's the expert. When it comes to economics, he's been there, done that. I learn a lot from him. I'm a simpleton, and I just look at it as it is. It's simply buying votes. I mean, that's what it is. And I thought it was rather ironic that the leader of Black Lives Matter just bought a house, $1.4 million in a nice part of Southern California that has a population of Black people at 1.4%. So it appears that Black Lives Matter does not really like Black people. Interesting. how that works.
They're following the Maxine Waters real estate plan, since Maxine Waters lives in one of the most prestigious Los Angeles neighborhoods, Hancock Park, and represents what, Watts or Compton.
She doesn't even know where it's at. She doesn't even know where Watts and Compton is, let alone her house is worth something like over $4 million.
And by the way, I just want to bring something up quickly. Has anybody ever noticed there's a real similarity in appearance between her and Al Sharpton? Just saying.
Similarity in what way, sir?
They look very similar. Similar hairstyle. I'm going to hell. But
I
don't worry. It'll be a good place.
I've been fighting against Maxine Waters since the 1970s when she was pushing school busing, and I was opting for neighborhood schools, and we've been fighting back and forth forever. And every time there would be one referendum after another in Los Angeles, and the voters would always be on the side of neighborhood schools, but the courts would always overturn that and let the lobbyists for the African Americans, freedom fighters, have their way.
But here's my question: aren't people going to realize? And I'll ask this. I mean, I think people realize things, but they just don't care because they believe that they've come to believe that it's rich people's job to take care of them. It's the corporation, let's tax the corporations more, let's tax people that make money more. And that's enough money to somehow subsidize everybody else, Ben. And they don't realize that is the numbers don't add up by anything.
No, the numbers don't add up at all. There's just not enough money out there. You take money to well-to-do people and give it to non-well-to-do people and make everybody rich. There's just not enough money out there in the pot. There's a lot of money. There's a hell of a lot of money floating around, but there's not enough to make every poor person rich. And anyway, it wouldn't do them any good because they would still be lacking self-esteem and self-discipline and all the great attributes that make people successful in life. So it is, to me, very sad that we are going to basically planning, the Democrat Party is basically planning to keep African-American people in chains and shackles forever, shackles of dependence on the federal government forever, in order to make sure that they are in the Democrats' pocket forever. And if I were a Black person, I would be kind of insulted at the idea that the Democratic Party thought that I had to be bribed in order to be successful, and that I couldn't be successful on my own or by my own endeavors. I look at people playing basketball. That is an incredibly hard game. That is an incredibly exhausting game. That's a game requiring unbelievable finesse and skill. Is there somebody from the Department of Education out there whispering plays to all the African-American players all the time? No, the Black people can do it by themselves. They can do it all by themselves if the government just get out of their way.
Gary?
Well, first of all, we need to understand that the poor in this country are not poor. They're rich.
That's good.
The world, they are the richest people in the world. They are in the top 1%, most of them. So let's get that straight. So, cry me a river. I don't want to hear it for the most part. We are the richest nation in the world. We have the richest poor people in the world. But I agree. And
very, very good. That's very, very good. I really, really admire that.
Well, thank you, Ben. And Ben, I want to ask you a question as far as when Nixon was president and we got off the gold standard, because I think Rockbreath brought that up. But what was the thought process of taking us off the gold standard? What was the public? So I was too young. I was barely born. What was the process of doing that and liquidating our economy is what they did.
It didn't liquidate the economy at all. Actually, my saintly father had a lot to do with that. And I might add, so did almost every other economist in the world. But we didn't need to be on the gold standard. We just didn't have enough gold to redeem all the dollars that were being held by foreigners and who could have said, all right, here's $100 billion of greenbacks. We want $100 billion worth of gold. We just didn't have the gold to make it good. I was not at this meeting, but I was told about this by my sainted father, that at a certain point when they were discussing this, and apparently the head of the Federal Reserve, the Central Bank of Belgium, a very prosperous country, small country, but a very rich country, said that he was going to demand gold for his dollars. And the President Nixon turned to the Secretary of the Treasury, was that Connolly? Yes, Connolly, and said, what will you do if he does that? And he says, I'll take that little Belgian fellow and I'll kick the shit out of him. Anyway, so that was sort of one way they had of approaching the problem. But another way they had of approaching the problem was to simply say, we are not going to exchange dollars for gold anymore. And if you don't like the price that we're offering for dollars and a price you have to pay for a dollar, then use somebody else's currency. But in fact, the dollar fell off very, very little. There was very little inflation caused by that. And it worked perfectly well, not having the dollar tied to gold. We did not need to have it tied to gold as long as it was, and we still don't need it to have it tied to gold.
Well, I just love, by the way, Gary, that only on this show could you have asked that question and gotten the answer directly from the source. How damn cool is that?
Well, yeah. And also through the history of it, Ben, and them always talking about tax the rich. And how they do that, their attitude is we're going to raise the corporate income tax, which actually puts us at a disadvantage worldwide, economically and manufacturing especially. But it's a regressive tax. And if you could explain to people that the richest companies in this country don't pay any tax anyway. So it attacks small businesses and middle-sized companies, not big companies. Corporate tax.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Gary.
No, that's if you could explain to people how that works, because every time they say we're going to tax the rich, everyone's all, "It's the rich, give it and go," and you go, "That's not how it works." Sorry.
There is no such thing as a corporation as a separate entity, group of human beings. Corporations are just a paper entry somewhere registering who owns various minuscule or large pieces of a corporation. And if the government applies a tax to corporations, that tax is borne by the stockholders of the corporation, namely stockholders and stockholders' wives and children and trusts for the children's education and children's bar mitzvahs when they get old enough for that. It's not, there is no separate entity such as a rich corporation who will pay that tax. They just don't exist. It's nowhere to be found in all the representative data of the U.S. government. So when we say we're going to tax the corporations more, it doesn't mean anything. It's all the tax is passed on to the individual people, individual stockholders, and that's fine. It's perfectly fair. Why not do that? But there's no reason whatsoever to pass on that tax just to individual corporations, individual rich corporations. It's just they're just going to pass it on to their stockholders, who in most cases are just families saving up for their children's education and for their retirement, or universities saving up to pay for the faculty salaries or ice skating rinks or whatever universities build these days.
You actually, you bring up a point which is really important. The media has managed to create this narrative, right? So where they take the CEOs of companies and imply that the CEO is the company, right? So they take his salary and they say, oh my God, this CEO is making $40 million. And they then associate that with your corporate tax. And they mix it all together, and they forget that their pensions are invested in these companies, that mom and pop and grandma and grandpa and your future generations are these companies. They like to separate, Ben, the CEO from the actual what the company does.
Right. The CEO is just a clerk, well-paid clerk. It's just a clerk. The money belongs to the stockholders. If the corporation is taxed, the tax falls upon the stockholders. If the corporation's chief executive is a criminal and a looter and is taking money out of the corporation illegally, money that does not belong to him, either by vote of the shareholders or vote of the board of directors, so then he's a criminal or she's a criminal, and that person should be put in prison. But in general, when corporations pay their top executives, that money just falls upon those individuals as individuals. There is no tax on corporations that allows a mythical bookkeeping entity called the corporation to pay the tax without it reducing the amount available to send junior and cis to college or pay for your nursing home when you're old. That's the whole thing that doesn't exist.
Ben, somebody in the chat has a question. What caused the wage price freeze?
Well, there was a wage price freeze. You're hitting close to the marker, because my old dad, whom I miss so very, very much, was actually in charge of the wage price freeze, and I believe it was 71, and that was called phase one. Phase one, in which Doris gets her own. Anyway, and who remembers that? Oh, even Judah doesn't know that's a Beatles song. Anyway, so the first phase of the effort to control inflation in the early 70s was a wage price freeze, in which there was literally a price assigned to everything: widgets, gallons of gasoline, bushels of wheat, pounds of butter, Diet Coke, best thing there is on the market. And there's except when they've been playing political games. And but that didn't work out very well, because that imposed a lot of rigidity. I mean, that imposes a lot and requires an incredible amount of record keeping and supervision, and turns the country into a dictatorship. So that Nixon got us out of that phase very quickly. But it is scary to think of how much control the government can have over an economy by controlling the prices. Control of prices is an enormously important way to control an economy.
I got to tell you, we are learning a lot tonight. I love that we get this firsthand knowledge. It really is. I think we're all should consider ourselves blessed that we are getting these economic lessons.
We're the United States of America. We're blessed there.
Yes, but the people that are listening, we here right now are blessed, Ben Stein, because we have your knowledge. And on that note, I want to tell everybody, thank you for listening to The World According to Ben Stein, of course. I want to thank everybody in the YouTube channel. Remind people, download the podcast, sign that petition. You could find the links for my show that I did with Gary on thesimplelifenow.com about dating in LA. You could also find my interview that I did with Rob Kendall. Rock Breath will give you the links for that in the YouTube chat. I want to remind everybody, download Gary's podcast. They're amazing. Go to spectator.org for Ben's columns. They're amazing. And you can find Ben on Parler at Ben Stein on Parler. And I want to welcome everybody back, of course, to The World According to Ben Stein. And I want to get back to this for a little bit, because somebody raised this point that I was going to bring up. First of all, Gary, acknowledged your amazing Rush shirt at the beginning of 2112. So that's the Meeks, and it's a quote that Ben uses often. But Ben, I want to get into something that Gary brought up, somebody brought up in the chat, which I think is an exceptional point. People love to bring up how expensive things are. Yet everybody seems to have, when it refers to healthcare and other things, but everybody seems to have the newest phones. They seem to have the newest TVs. They seem to have the newest cars. You know, in Los Angeles, I call them $50,000 millionaires. You know, you have people that have like $50,000 to $70,000 cars and live in apartments. But it's like we've lost our priorities, Ben.
Well,
I'm sorry.
With all due respect, it may seem to you that there's an enormous amount of very conspicuous consumption, and there is, especially in our glorious Los Angeles. But by and large, it isn't true that everyone has a new car. It isn't true that everyone has a brand new color TV. It isn't true that everyone has a brand new house. The level of consumption is very, very high, but we are a very, very rich country. I don't think the level of consumption is much higher in the U.S. than it is in Germany, and Germany was bombed to hell during World War II, and same is true of France, same is true of Italy. So I think Denmark probably has a higher GDP per capita than we do. So there are plenty of other countries that are high spending countries. Why can they afford to do it? Well, I mean, a car for a great many people is not that expensive an item compared to their total income. if you're a well-to-do person or you're a modestly well-to-do person, you buy a car on the installment plan. It doesn't cost very much. Or you can buy a very, very expensive car on the installment plan. It doesn't cost very much at all. And Americans are doing that. But, I mean, the level of consumption of new cars and new TVs is no higher than it was several years ago. And it's, as I say, it's a very, very small fraction of the total output of the economy.
Ben, what I'm really referring to is your priorities, people's priorities. You know, we constantly hear that healthcare, and healthcare is extremely important and that it's a right. But people often think that getting a new phone is a right. People often think that getting the latest computer is a right. And people often think, and somewhere along the line, when you were younger, when we were all younger, we knew, you know, growing up, we didn't have the newest cars. Growing up, we didn't always get the newest TVs. Schooling was more important. So, you know, certain things were more important than the newest things. And I think we've lost our way on what our priorities are, Ben. I could be dreaming, I could be imagining this, but it seems to be that people think having the newest phone is more important than health insurance.
With all due respect, the amount of money that people are spending on consumer goods as a total fraction of their income has not changed in a very long time.
Gary, what are your thoughts on that? Because maybe I'm out of.
No, Judah, let me say, Judah, you and I travel around together a great deal of the time, and we see fantastically lavish cars being driven by people who look homeless, and we see what look like homeless-looking people getting in and out of very fancy cars at my favorite grocery store, the Pavilion. So I can see where you would get the impression, but as a matter of data as opposed to anecdotes, it's just not true.
Okay, Gary.
Yeah, I think it's harder for me because I'm an eyeball test guy, and like I said, after the first stimulus checks, when I was in Spokane when COVID hit, I saw more brand new $50,000 plus trucks with dealer plates than I'd ever seen before. And also the unemployment enhancement kicked in, and it was interesting that the timing of it just so happened to coincide. And I saw a lot of big round people walking around at 10 in the morning with no job, shopping at Walmart and everywhere else. And I think we've just lost our priorities of what's important. You know, it's, you know,
well, with the greatest respect, you may think that, Gary, and God bless you. We all love you. At least I think everyone watching this show loves you. It's just not true that people are spending a dramatically or even noticeably greater amount of their income on new cars or new TVs than they were 10 years, 20 years, 30 years ago. I mean, it just isn't true.
It just seems like that to us because we didn't have it.
Yeah.
Because we see those glittering cars in the parking lot of Pavilions, or the parking lot of Vintage near our house in Malibu, and so we think everybody's rich. I mean, you and I, Judah, I don't know, you don't come out to Malibu with me as much as you used to, but I get out of the car there, and all around me are Ferraris and Bentleys and Lamborghinis, and people getting out of them look like they should be in a homeless encampment. So I can understand why it gives that impression, why that impression is given.
Well, those are just celebrities and movie stars, and so
I don't know if they are. I don't know who they are.
And by the way, Gary actually really raises a great point, by the way, Ben. And I think, listen, I'm totally going on anecdotal data, but some of the most, do you remember, I want to say 3 months into COVID, as you were sitting at home, that we were inundated with car ads that you didn't have to pay for 6 months.
I remember it very, very, very well.
So that might be a reason why, Gary, you were seeing a ton of people with a ton of new cars, because when you give people 6 months where they think, oh, it's 6 months free, not realizing that there's an eventual back end. I would imagine in 2 years, Gary, you're going to see a lot of tow trucks in those same areas hauling off those cars, because sadly people didn't realize they might not be able to afford those cars. That's anecdotal data. I could be totally wrong.
But most of them are going to be stolen.
It's anecdotal, but it's anecdote, but it's interesting anecdote, and the impression that people form of the life around them has something to do with economic behavior. I mean, if people form the impression that there's money to burn, they will spend more. But so far, there has not been a big increase in consumer spending as a percentage of the national income.
Do you think the income's gone up at the same time then? So it's kind of just, Ben, do you think the income level's gone up at the same time as the spending then? So it's kind of coincided. They've gone up evenly together, basically.
Neither of them has actually gone up that incredibly much. I mean, we have prosperity, but we don't have any more prosperity than we did 14, 15 months ago under President Trump. The idea that we're just bursting into scenes with prosperity is true if you're in the stock market. If you're in the property market, you do tend to do well. Although I'd like to assure you that not every part of it does well. But but in general, Americans are spending at roughly the same levels of proportion that they were spending at a long time, and that takes a very long time to change.
But I would argue that we've been pumping money into the economy, this funny money.
That's for sure.
Beneficiaries have been the lower end who are buying these cars who can't afford the money and buying out everything on Amazon, and then it floats right back up to the top. So I would agree with you, but I think we've been pumping in money to where these people are getting a lot of free, easy money as well, even though the numbers stay the same.
Well, there's a very large number of people in this country who are supported by government subsidies of all kinds. And that is a fact, and it's probably not a good fact in the sense that the country will become addicted to subsidization, and that once they become addicted to subsidization, it's hard to see how it'll stop. But it'll stop except in tears. And we don't, as my father used to say, if something cannot go on forever, it will stop. And this will stop, but we're nowhere near at the level at which it has to stop, or else we're going to be broke. We are heading towards national insolvency, but it takes a long time to get there.
Okay, and on that note, I want to switch gears a little bit. If you just tuned in, you are listening to The World According to that man, Benjamin Jeremy Stein, and we've all been really blessed for the last 30 minutes to get an education that a lot of kids, a lot of people don't get, and we got it from the source. Ben used to be a teacher, and his students were truly blessed to get that education.
I assure you, I loved them too.
Yes, I know you did. And but on that note, welcome back to The World According to Ben Stein. And I want to get into something because it's been bothering me for quite a while. This word insurrection has been really bothering me for quite a while because people don't, really understand the definition of this word. It's one of those words that it's almost like it's like a mass racist call. You're all insurrectionists. You're all racist. It's hard to fight back once you use certain words. So they used it for the people on the Capitol. But Ben, I want to get into this. Joe Biden is doing executive orders on trying to figure out on gun control, trying to figure out executive orders on the filibuster, trying to figure out executive orders on court packing, and trying to figure out other loopholes in the Constitution. And everybody, when Trump was asking Mike Pence to study the Constitution and to say to not certify the vote, they called it blasphemy. But as this jackass Biden is fully committing an insurrection against our Constitution.
Well, if I may say so, I was stopped dead in my tracks just now by you using the word loopholes. I don't think that there are loopholes in the Constitution for these executive orders. I think
I said trying.
I think at some point, if we ever get a Supreme Court that has any gonads, they're going to say, hey, we have a long, complicated Constitution that allows us it shows us how we're to enact legislation to govern the country. It's not just supposed to be done by the president typing something up and then signing it. And that seems to have been completely forgotten now. There is no process in the Constitution for just having blanket authority to change laws simply by saying, oh, this is an executive order, and therefore we can do any darn thing we want with it. That's a figment of somebody's imagination. That's just doesn't happen. There certainly are cases where executive orders do apply, but the last time we had a president wildly asserting executive privilege, executive orders, was Abraham Lincoln during the war between the states. And eventually the Supreme Court caught up with him, and he had long since entered immortality, and said, wait a minute, you can't have done this. This isn't allowed. And I'm not sure we've ever had any kind of mass litigation questioning mass issuing of executive orders before. Obviously, there was quite a bit of questioning of it during the Great Depression, but mass questioning of these, what I would say is insurrectionist executive orders, that hasn't been done yet. It'll be interesting to see what the courts say about it.
I have a bad feeling about the court, what they're going to say about it, because Ben, they never seem to be on the right side of things, even when they are on the right, Gary.
Well, yeah, and if I might need to brush up on my constitutional law, I am no expert, but I do understand like the Fourth Amendment and certain things and Second Amendment that Biden's going after completely unconstitutionally. And when he gave that statement about gun control and why he's using these these rulings and what he's doing, I was like, wait, hold on a second here. First of all, when you can't even figure out ATF instead of AFT, I'm getting scared now. And he actually, about 90% of what he said during that I guess it was a press conference for gun control, 90% of it was utterly false and literally made up. He just made things up. But I thought that you could only do that for regulations. I didn't think you could pass laws by executive privilege.
I don't think you can either. And if I may go back again to anecdote, long ago when President Obama was president, Mr. Obama issued an executive order compelling the government or some part of the government to buy, I believe it was to buy the bonds of Chrysler Corporation, or to make sure that the bonds were bought by somebody who had the money to buy them. And I remember very well calling up the White House, speaking to the press secretary and saying, where is his right to do that in the Constitution? And this man would never give me an answer. They never even seriously tried. And basically what they said was, well, he's the president, he won the election, he can do whatever he wants. And that's if that's true, then goodbye to the Constitution, and we're all in a lot of trouble.
Well, yeah, especially when he's passing laws that don't affect anyone but legal gun owners. Criminals don't do background checks. Criminals don't get guns with serial numbers. This is the biggest asinine red herring I've ever seen. They're trying to control weapons of law-abiding citizens. They're trying to create a big registry. It's obvious for anyone who understands what they're trying to do. They want to know how many guns Gary owns and where they're at. That's what they want to know. Good luck with that.
But they're going to try to find that. They are going to try to find that. But that, if I may say so, while the Second Amendment is a very, very important part of the Constitution, that's just the beginning. If the Supreme Court allows the president and the executive branch to simply ignore the Constitution in terms of how laws get passed, it's not just figuratively or saying it to make a dramatic point. It really is the end of America.
Yeah. Well, and to think that there's 400 million guns in the United States, and somehow they're going to reduce crime by taking them away from the people who can actually legally defend themselves and are law-abiding citizens. And they don't, the problem is they don't address the problem of gun violence. And the statistics bear this out, that especially rifles are involved in a small fraction of crimes and killings. I mean, a small
fraction of 1%. Not even a small fraction of 1%.
Most are done by unregistered handguns.
Right.
How does that end up being my fault? I don't do that. And that's
but let's go even deeper into what you just said, because one of the ways they're trying to get loophole is by calling it a health crisis, right?
Absolutely.
So they never refer to what goes on in Chicago every weekend, what goes on in these inner cities every weekend, like a video game of mass murder, as a health crisis. That somehow isn't a health crisis. Legal gun owners, that's a health crisis. Not this horrific actions that's going on in these communities. That they never touch that as a health crisis and try to figure out what's going on there. Or as Ben likes, is very fond of, not fond of, but is very fearful of, the public school education, the reading levels as being a public health crisis, the math levels as being a public health crisis, Ben. That's never the health crisis. Now all of a sudden it's guns.
Well, this reminds me of something really terrifying. Big Wifey and I watch documentaries every night. And people ask us all the time why we spend so much time watching these documentaries about World War II. And as I always say, because it is the most fascinating thing that's ever happened in the history of the world. But after Hitler took power, I forget what the day was, but it was either early 32 or late 32 or early 33. Someone, either the Nazis or someone else, burned down the Reichstag, which is the same as similar to our capital. And Hitler said it had been the communists. Hitler said it was a conspiracy against the nation. And he issued an executive order that said from now on he would rule by emergency decree, and that the state of Germany was now to be governed by emergency decree. And that was never lifted until after VE Day. Germany was governed by a state of emergency from the burning of the Reichstag to the surrender of Germany to the Allied powers and to Russia, to the Soviet Union. And that's what I see happening now. That is why COVID scares me so much. I think that some evil people have in mind using COVID as the emergency to justify all kinds of abridgments of the Constitution. I see it already happening, and it is extremely discouraging, and not just discouraging, but terrifying. The Constitution is our lifeline in the United States of America. If we are going to toss it aside, we're in real serious trouble.
Well, yeah. Well, for that, think about that, what COVID did. This is the first time in history where healthy people were quarantined. That's scary. That's scary.
Very, very, very good point. Very, very, very good point. It's not stopped yet. And now they're coming out with these allegations, and they may well be true. I'm not saying that they're made up, about new strains of the virus that are not taken care of by the inoculation, and therefore they're going to have states of emergency indefinitely. This is a very worrisome prospect.
No, you both are. The point that Gary just brought up is really brilliant, and the point that you brought up, Ben, is absolutely brilliant. And
thank you. God bless you.
No, it really is. And the lack of critical thinking, the lack of mass critical thinking, we're as guilty and as conservatives as when Bush was and Larry Klayman fought against it, which was basically the invasion of privacy, that we allowed certain things to happen, all under the guise of terrorism, that we allowed certain things to take place. And shame on me, shame on on that type of stuff. But the left right now is doing the same exact thing. They are taking COVID and they are using it to as much as they possibly can.
Yeah, they're using COVID to sweep the streets clean of any kind of dissent against President Biden and Mrs. Harris. It isn't clear to me at all that this is a legitimate exercise of power under the Constitution. And I think Judah correctly nailed it. The Supreme Court has gotten to be so weak and so frightened of something, I'm not sure what. I just worry terribly. The last time we had a president who completely ignored the Constitution, I was starting to say this several minutes ago, was Abraham Lincoln. At the beginning of the Civil War, he declared that the firing on Fort Sumter by the would-be secessionists was an act of national emergency. It justified all kinds of violations of the law, and in fact, justified the arrest of most of the state of Maryland, my home state, legislature to keep them from voting to secede from the Union. Same thing with Missouri, same thing with Kentucky. The whole course of the Civil War, war between the states, would have been different if President Lincoln had not done these extra constitutional things. Maybe it's a good thing that he did because it kept the country together, but it did also just demolish the Constitution for a good long while.
No, and it's you also brought up something. By the way, if you just tuned in, you are listening to The World According to Ben Stein, that man. You can find our podcast. Please get our podcast, The World According to Ben Stein, on Apple or Stitcher. Or, there's tons of them that you can download them on. And of course, Gary's thesimplelifenow.com website. Amazing. Buy his books. Listen to Gary's philosophies. They're great. And of course, that man, Benjamin Jeremy Stein. But they keep on doing this. And you're right. There's a new strain, right? Let's 1984 them even more. We found this new variant and because we as laymen are never going to be able to say, what the hell are you talking about? Because they never explain exactly, Ben, what it is. They just use words that terrify people. Because if any of us walked into a doctor's office after having suffered from anything, and the doctor said, well, you have a new variant of it now, we'd all be like, does that mean what does that mean? And they're using words to terrify us, man.
They're using words and actions. Yeah. Like the words are emergency, new variant, as you say, those are the words, but the actions of saying, we don't have to have Congress pass the laws, we are the law, we are the law. There's a famous movie, I'm sure Judah will remember it, because he's, it's that great movie with Orson Welles playing the corrupt sheriff in border town in Mexico, where he says, I am the law. That's sort of what we're seeing now. And to me, it's extremely frightening. Maybe I'm wrong, maybe I've misunderstood it totally, but to me, it's very frightening. I'd like to see laws go through the Constitution the way the framers of the Constitution intended.
Gary, you being a person that likes to be off the grid, and your thoughts on this, because I know your thoughts on COVID, and I know your thoughts.
Are we losing your sound?
On whatever, but do you ever see a way us getting past this?
Well, I got kicked out of a place today for not wearing a mask, so I'm not real sure. And the little woke mangina who did it was really rude in the way he did it. But I don't, because I've always said that why have we not received the true numbers as taxpayers, as the people they just quarantined, and the people's lives and livelihoods they just took away arbitrarily. I didn't get a decision in this. Why haven't they told us the real numbers on how many people died from only COVID? I want to know. No other underlying health conditions. Zero. I want to know how many people in America died only from COVID. They need to answer that question. I want to know. And we'll never hear from them, because I'll put money on it that the numbers could be as low as 1,000, at highest 10,000.
My dear friend, what you want means nothing to these people. You are just a number. You're nobody.
Exactly. I'm a total nobody.
The people who run the government, who run these important departments, they are somebody. The people who run the news bureaus at important networks and giant news organizations in print and on the air and on the internet, they're somebody. You're nobody. Sorry.
I can almost guarantee you this: if Trump didn't lose the election, we would have hearings and panels and every single thing known to man like they did. And we would have commissions like they had on 9/11. After 9/11, we'd have commissions like they did with Iraq. We'd have commissions up the wazoo. But Biden won. And all of a sudden, What's another 125,000 supposed deaths due to this thing? It's the tickers are gone, the fear factor's gone. All we know is we still have to wear masks after we get a vaccine. It's absolute insanity, Ben. And this is where Republicans, and this is why I brought up the thing about the insurrection, because as I look back on it now, I wish Mike Pence that day did look at the Constitution, didn't certify what he might have thought was fraud, because I could tell you if it was the left, the way they're acting now, they would have treated this very differently, Ben.
Well, that is, as the saying goes, beyond my pay grade. I don't know what Mr. Pence had the authority to do. I do know that for something as gigantic as this to have happened, without the Supreme Court saying there's even one case that merited judicial examination, is extremely worrisome. I mean, there are hundreds of cases and instances brought before the court of cases where there are more votes counted than people lived in the area in question. To think that the Supreme Court just thumbed their nose at those facts and data points, that's very frightening. And if the Supreme Court has neutered itself, we're in a really bad problem, because that's the Supreme Court is an extremely large part of the federal government.
And hence what separates the Ben, these idiotic Republicans and Democrats. They just say, and then say, we'll prove it later. Republicans, on the other hand, don't follow that same thread. And there were no Republicans, not enough, screaming from the rooftops, that 1 + 1 isn't adding up to 2, and claiming and looking at thoroughly through tons of different, not anecdotal data, Ben, like you love to use, real data, that certain impossibilities happened. And we played by it stupidly. And as we look at what Democrats are doing right now with executive actions on gun control, every day we heard Trump is a fascist. I can't think of a more fascist thing than Joe Biden is doing right now than what he's dreaming about, or people because let's be real, when he speaks, he's got earpieces in, Ben. And it depends on the day of what message, if it's AOC on one day, if it's whatever leftist group on the other day, they're giving him the talking points. And the damage that you've spoken about, what he's doing to the Constitution, is absolutely frightening.
Well, you heard him say that. Ben, did you guys hear? He said that, I'm going to get your opinion on this, Ben. In his speech against the executive orders against gun control that he was executing, he said that amendments are not absolute in the Constitution. Try that one. Let that one digest.
Yeah. That's I did see that. It's scary, but the whole thing is scary. But in a sense, life goes on day by day in America. I had a very fine meal of crab cakes this evening. I had delicious some kind of carrot soup. It was delicious. I looked out the window just before I came in here to look at the computer. The sun was setting over the Santa Rosa Mountains. Everything looked great. But the scary thing is when they show the newsreels of Berlin and Germany and the Baltic beaches after Hitler took power, that looks like fun and games too. Everything can look like fun and games until it stops.
No, you raise a great point. And if you look outside, like I've shared the stories, I know you live in a certain part of town, Ben, that's absolutely beautiful, but as you drive 3 to 4 miles away, it starts looking like that. As you walk into a mobile station or a gas station to get gas, and you see the extra plexiglass up, you see all of it's like a freakish way of living that there's no data on. I mean, think about this. You couldn't find Purell when this thing first came out, right? I mean, like every company in America started making hand sanitizers because so we were told you could get it like this, you could get it like this. Nobody, and to this day, that we still don't know. And the problem is There's nobody that's doing commissions because everybody is scared to death to say, maybe your science is wrong. Maybe everybody is so scared because they're terrified of being vilified by the media.
Right, you're a racist if you say the science is wrong. You're a racist if you say that gun control is not going to help, and that the real problem is in the non-white inner cities, not in the suburbs or on the farms. You can be called a racist all the time. I mean, these people make McCarthy look like a nun in terms of his silence, and yet they completely get away with it.
No, it's
too young to remember McCarthy.
No, I mean, well, I've studied. I mean, we all know. I mean, I hope most people know who McCarthy was. But Gary, you've been doing it since the beginning. You've been living off the grid. You've been, talking about what the government has, the government control, and so has Ben for that matter. But you don't wear a mask. You haven't.
I did in places that I had to go into that I literally had to. They would not let me shop there otherwise. But at this point, I've stopped completely, and I don't care. But like I said, most places don't care. But I'm in a state, Arizona, where they've lifted the mask ban or mask mandatory. So when I walked into this place today, and this little mouth on this guy, he was really tough behind the counter. He wasn't going to say anything to my face. But I'm over it. I'm done. And there's a great video. I'm trying to think who put this out. I got it on Twitter of all things. But I saw it, and it was this crazy, overweight young lady screaming and yelling that she has all these health conditions, and why can't people wear their effing masks? And I went off. I went, why do I have to wear a mask for your dumb fat ass? Why don't you go stay home and stop eating cupcakes? And maybe that upper respiratory problem will go away. And that's where we're at. It's like, wait, why do we have to wear a mask and stay home? Life is unfair. If you have a health condition, and every year when the flu was bad, and it has been many years, we told my grandmother, don't go out. Maybe stay home. You're at risk. My mom does it to this day. What's happened is now the meek expect the strong to sacrifice their lives so they can go out and shop at Walmart and get their 24 pack of Hot Pockets. Bullshit. I'm over it. I'm done. I'm done. So
there's a Hot Pocket. What is
Ben, you don't want one. Let's just put it that way. If you don't know what
it's sort of like Ben. It's sort of like a Chef Boyardee ravioli.
Oh, I love those.
Put it frozen, but in a much larger thing that you put in the microwave for about a minute and a half. And I hate to say it, Gary, they're not half bad. But I want to get back to this one more time before we leave for the night. Ben, where do you see we have gas prices right now in California as you were driving today? I'm sure you must have seen close to $6 a gallon.
Wait, what? Time out. In California, it's $6 a gallon?
It's getting close, yeah. It's $6.
It's only like $3.10 here, and I thought that was outrageous.
Yeah, $6 a gallon almost in certain parts. I'm reading $2.40 in Tyler, Texas, Ben. Do you see us, and I want to ask you this seriously, Ben, because I think this is a big concern of people's. Can we sustain what's going on? Could we sustain what Biden's doing? The economy sustain this? Where are we headed? I know you can't predict, but in your humble.
I'm saying, I think we can sustain it economically for a very long time, very, 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 very long time. But I think the attack on our civil rights and the attack on our Constitution is extremely frightening. And I would like to see more resistance to it in the courts and more resistance to it from the Republicans in the state legislatures and in the federal legislature. And I don't understand why there isn't more resistance to that. That just puzzles me and it scares me.
Yeah, I mean, so I want to go back. So when Nixon was being tortured and railroaded, he had there were very few Republicans, right? That's why he had to. That's why he resigned.
There were enough to have slowed the process considerably, but they were scared to death of the media too. People have been scared to death of the media for a long time.
And they haven't learned their lesson.
Nope.
40 years later, over 40 years later. And that's
47 years later, they have not learned their lesson.
And that, Ben, that is a terrifying thought. And that's why I want to get back to this. It is so important. People, get that petition out there, email it to your friends, because I will say this now, and I'll say it forever. There is one person in America who could get away and could unite the party, and that is Donald J. Trump. I will say that I will scream that. He is the only person with the cojones the size of Bayonne to get up on stage and to say it back to them. And I wish others would follow. We have a few like Ted Cruz and Rand Paul, but there just aren't enough that haven't learned in over 47 years. No matter how nice you are, they still hate your guts.
Say it loud. I'm an American and I'm proud. I'd like to hear that said. I'd like to hear that said.
And on that note, I want to thank everybody that's been listening to The World According to Ben Stein tonight in the YouTube chat. We love your comments. We love your questions. I'm blessed that we got this great history lesson tonight. I want to thank Gary Collins from thesimplelifenow.com for asking some great questions. Gary asks great questions. He's got a great internet show. Sorry, Gary?
I'm no dummy. You take advantage of the resources. All right.
Yeah. And Ben is an American resource. I like that. That should be your Ben Stein, American resource. And of course, the show wouldn't be complete without the man, the myth, the legend, Benjamin Jeremy Stein. You can find him at spectator.org. Of course, on Parler at Ben Stein. And Ben, you sung us in. I don't know if you want to sing us out, but you let me know.
We are soldiers in the army. We have to fight, although we have to die. Yes, we are soldiers in the army. We got to fight it, Lord, until we die.
Thank you very much, everybody. Have a great night.
God bless you.
Thank you.
God bless you. God bless you. God bless you. God bless you. God bless you. God bless you, one and all.